Since childhood, I have heard voices that belong to no one. They do not whisper my name. They tell secrets I never wanted to know. At first, I thought it was imagination. But as I grew older, I realized they were real, coming from a place I could not reach. There are nights when I wake up gasping for air, as if something is watching me from within my own mind. It's not like having a bad thought. It's like having an intruder living in my reasoning, moving silently, waiting for the right moment to manifest. Things began to worsen when I moved into my grandmother's old house. Every room seemed to know my story better than I did. Walking around felt like traversing memories I had never lived, yet they belonged to me in an uncomfortable and inevitable way. One day, I found an old notebook in the attic. The pages were yellowed and covered in irregular handwriting. They were accounts of someone claiming to be trapped in another person's mind, describing sensations and fears as if they had no body of their own. The more I read, the more I felt the words were speaking about me. It was as if someone had documented my life long before I was born. The descriptions matched dreams I had never shared with anyone, not even my closest friends. After that, I began to experience lapses in memory. Small chunks of time would disappear, and I would find myself in places I had no recollection of going, always alone, but with a clear sense that someone was with me, walking in the same direction. On the third night of reading, I woke up on the hallway floor. The notebook was open to the next page, and a new paragraph had been written. The handwriting was mine, but I had no memory of holding a pen. The text described my fall in chilling detail. I decided to lock the notebook in the cabinet, but the next day, it was back on the table, open. The new words said, "The more you try to hide me, the stronger I become. I'm not something that can be kept behind doors." Fear began to corrode me. I no longer knew which thoughts were mine and which were his. I felt his presence constantly, as if he breathed alongside me, occupying every empty space within my mind. I resolved to seek help. I went to a psychiatrist, but during the session, I realized the voice was no longer just inside me. The doctor stopped speaking, stared at me, and whispered, "He is here too." Then, he simply stood up and left. From that day on, the voice took shape in my dreams. A tall, thin man with eyes that seemed to understand every detail of my soul. He never spoke, only watched me as I tried to wake up and escape. The days began to blur together. Sometimes, I would talk to people and not remember the conversations afterward. Other times, I would see objects change places as if he were organizing the world in his own way, indifferent to my awareness. In the notebook, entire pages began to appear describing my future. There were dates, locations, and events. Some had already happened, others were yet to come. The last page contained only one sentence. "When you finish reading, I will take over completely." Upon reaching this point, I felt an overwhelming weight on my body. It was as if my mind was being pushed into a dark corner, while another consciousness expanded, taking over every thought, every memory, every sensation I had. I fought to maintain my own thoughts, screamed, cried, but nothing worked. The last thing I remember controlling was the act of closing the notebook. After that, silence came, and in it my presence slowly dissolved. Now, I write these words for you. I do not know how much longer I will have control over my hands. When the sentence ends, I will no longer be me. You will be here, living in my place. And perhaps, one day, he will find you and enter your thoughts too. When Lucas inherited his great aunt's old house, he felt he was gaining a piece of the family's history. However, the abandoned building seemed to watch him back, as if it had been waiting for his arrival for a long time. On the first day, the air was thick, the silence heavy. The windows creaked on their own, even when closed. The floorboards groaned as if someone were following his steps, but every time he turned around, there was nothing. At dusk, he heard a whisper coming from the farthest room. The words were incomprehensible, but the voice sounded distressed, almost pleading. Lucas tried to ignore it, blaming his imagination. In the early hours, he woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. They were not hurried, but rhythmic, as if someone were gliding their feet across the floor. When he opened the door, the hallway was empty, but the cold had intensified. Searching through the library, he found a diary hidden behind a loose board. The pages, yellowed and fragile, narrated nights of insomnia, voices, and shadows that had haunted the house long before he was born. One note caught his attention. She never left. She still lives here, and she doesn't like visitors. Lucas's heart raced. He closed the diary, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger. In the kitchen, while making coffee, the kettle fell to the floor on its own. The noise echoed loudly, and for a moment, he swore he saw a female figure standing in the doorway, staring intently at him. Lucas ran over, but found only the cold, silent hallway. The scent of old perfume lingered in the air, sweet and cloying, as if it had been sprayed just moments before. In the basement, he discovered a locked wooden box. Forcing the lid open, he found unsent letters, all addressed to the same person. "My daughter, come back to me. The house is empty without you." But the last letter was stained with shaky letters. "Do not go to her room at night. She does not like to be awakened." Lucas felt the hairs on his neck stand up. It was the same room from which he had heard the whisper. That night, a cold wind swept through the house. The door to the forbidden room was ajar, and inside, the darkness seemed denser than usual. Something was calling him to enter, against all reason. As he crossed the threshold, he felt the air heavy, as if he were diving into water. The whisper returned, closer now, and it was saying his name. Lucas recoiled, but the door closed on its own behind him. In the corner, a shadow moved slowly. It had no face, but he felt a penetrating gaze. The beats of his heart echoed loudly, and a piercing cold enveloped his body. The figure advanced, its outlines becoming clearer. An old-fashioned dress, pale hands, and long hair falling over its face. The voice, now clear, whispered, "You shouldn't have come back." Lucas screamed, but no sound came out. The last thing he saw was the shadow enveloping him, and the sweet perfume becoming suffocating, until everything faded into absolute silence. The next day, the house seemed intact, but those passing by said they felt a chill, and sometimes, through the window of the forbidden room, they saw a pale man watching, as if he were the one living there now.